Cybersecurity projects require project management. Understanding how the two disciplines work together can make your cybersecurity projects far more successful from every perspective. Today, on this episode of the CyberWatch Expert Series. Welcome to the CyberWatch Expert Series. Today we're talking with Lori Keller, Senior IT Security Project Manager for Access Point Consulting. We're going to be talking with Lori about the role that the discipline of project management can have on the success or failure of cybersecurity deployments. How much should you understand about project management if you want your cybersecurity projects to succeed? And is general purpose project management enough? Or should you focus on special requirements for cybersecurity projects? We're going to talk about these and more in the discussion, so get ready. And now, my conversation with Lori Keller. Lori Keller, welcome to the CyberWatch Expert Series. We're very pleased to have you here.
I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, let's begin. We're going to be talking about project management and cybersecurity. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about how you came to focus on this? What led you to the position where you are now?
I initially started out as a systems administrator and network administrator, building servers, building networks, running cable, putting actual infrastructure in place. And as things became more complicated, there became more project management aspects of managing other people that were collaborating within those project spaces. And I found that I really loved the technology. I loved the project work. And in particular, one of the first projects that I did that called for a heavy use of security was expanding a hospital's network. They had bought some other sites. We needed to expand the network to them, but we needed to be able to encrypt material. We had to be PCI compliant. We had to manage email safely. And that was really where I kind of cut my teeth on the security aspects of project management and found that I absolutely loved it.
Well, that's really interesting because you mentioned a case where you have regulations. You mentioned PCI compliance. For a healthcare thing, there's also going to be, as we know, HIPAA.
Yes, sir.
And let me ask, how strongly will the regulatory requirements influence what goes on with project management? Or is project management a discipline that sort of sits apart from any specific regulations and external requirements like that?
Project management is the hammer, and the disciplines, the regulatory frameworks, change how you wield your hammer. The project management aspects of managing your resources, your budget, your risk, creating your documentation, creating your project plan is all a little higher level in terms of how it is executed. But when you've got hard things like the PCI and NIST, ISO, CIS 18, and HIPAA, often not only the end product of what you're putting in place with the project, but also how you put that in place has to be compliant. So that changes how you project manage, how you apply your project manager skills. You've got to make sure you've got the right roles and resources executing. They have to execute their tasks in a particular way so that they're in compliant with those framework controls. And of course, you've got to be able to prove all along the way that you're staying compliant with this. So that harks back to good communication, collaboration, and documentation. And then at the end, of course, you've got your PCI or HIPAA compliant security solution or security hardening that you have in place that you have to then prove that it's achieved that hardening. And that's some additional steps that wouldn't necessarily be part of a standard project management.
I mean, I hear you talk about all the different components that you're looking at within a project. I think a lot of people have the impression that the big decision on project management is whether you're going to use a Gantt chart or a PERT chart to keep track of everything. But you're talking about the actual sort of what used to be the paper trail, the how am I going to stage things, may be the smallest part of all this. You're talking about human relations, you're talking about dealing with budgets, all of these. So, could you walk us through a little bit about how you get started when someone comes to you with a project and says, we need to make the following thing happen, let's say a secure network someplace. What are your thoughts? How do you get started on that process?
That's juicy. That's a great question. So, the first thing you want to do when somebody says, hey, I've got this thing and I need to do it, that starts your requirements gathering. Gathering those clear requirements ensures that whatever your customer or your leader is talking or thinking about, that the team implements it and uses the same thought process and guidelines that your leaderships and or customer is thinking about. And you ask the leading questions of what's important about the schedule? What are things that have to happen? Are there any deadlines that we're trying to make? um, what's the problem that we're trying to solve, and are we certain that this solution is going to solve the problem, and how do you want us to do work at the end to prove that your problem has been solved by this solution. um, then we talk about how you want that solution put in place. Do you already have a vendor selected? um, do you just know that you want security hardening but you're not sure which pieces to harden? That tells a project manager how certain and or how much of a nice complete little boxed set of requirements does the customer really have in their head, or is there a little bit more input or work required to crispify some really nice tight goals out of what they're thinking. And those requirements get written down and they get circulated among all the people who are going to be stakeholders, not just the customer, but your project team, who may look at a requirement and go, hey, have they thought about maybe this thing or that thing? And then it opens up a conversation so that the person who wants the thing done hears from the experts, ostensibly their project team and their project manager, um, to validate that what they have decided to do is the best thing for the goal that they want to achieve. And they get feedback about how it's going to be created. And of course, we ask questions about what's your budget, what's your timeline, what are your resources, what kind of risks are we going to run into? Do you know of any issues that we might hit? All of those factors come into baking out a really juicy project plan.
Speaking of juicy project plans, it sounds like you are frequently brought in to help manage a project, and let's call it an IT project, where the goal at the end is to have a secure IT implementation.
Yes.
And so I think one of the questions that a lot of people have is when you are dealing with the cybersecurity aspect, do you find it more typical to be brought in to help make the overall project secure, or is implementing the security for a project a separate project on its own? I guess it's a variation on the old, is security built in or laid on top of an implementation? And is that something that you deal with when you're looking at a project or when you're being brought into a project?
From what I'm hearing from your question, I would say that typically security is bolt on. And as much as people do try and plan for it, a lot of security is by its nature bolt on because it changes so fast. You know, that even if you are very planful, your 1 year, 5 year roadmap for your company is going to change because of the nature of the changing threats that are in the environment. Even while we try to maintain a consistency of implementing a security roadmap for a company, there is still the urgent bolt on aspect of any cybersecurity project because of the immediacy of the need, speed to market, and speed of change of the threats in the environment. Did that address your question, or did I kind of go off on a little bit of a tangent?
No, no, that is exactly right. And it seems interesting that security is still, as you say, by its nature, frequently a bolt-on, an add-on, something that's laid on top of IT, even though we have for years had organizations like CISA, like the NSA, emphasizing secure by design and building security in to an implementation, a product, a project, whatever it might be. So I think it's fascinating that there's still that sort of tension there. Is negotiating that kind of tension something that a project manager is going to have to deal with?
The project manager will have to facilitate conversations that alleviate that tension. It is not the project manager's responsibility solely to address and relieve and alleviate the tension because they are knowledgeable about all things security. That's not the case. But acknowledging that tension and making sure that it's addressed is absolutely a part of project management. It's part of the human relationship that if somebody has had a breach or they've got something that they know is a problem, or they're even remediating vulnerabilities. They're putting something in place to remediate vulnerabilities that maybe a penetration test has shown them. It's the responsibility of the project manager to assuage the concerns of the customer and show them that remediation or implementation is happening in the most streamlined way possible. So we're getting there as fast as we can. And providing them with documentation and status updates, proof of the remediation, and that their environment is becoming more secure as the project matures and completes. So it's absolutely an unwritten part of project management. But if you want to manage customers' expectations and make sure that you've got a happy customer at the end, that's absolutely something that has to be managed.
So one of the things that I want to get into in just a moment is basically how one becomes a project manager. Assuming that there's something ideally more formal, more involved than you have a project dumped in your lap, and therefore you have to manage it. Um, but before I get to that, I wanted to ask whether there are special requirements for people who are managing projects that do involve cybersecurity? Or is this a case where the discipline of project management is pretty much the same whether you are managing a project in IT or managing a project for building a barn for dairy cattle?
That's a very good question. That question is a lot like, what's the best way to raise a child? Everybody's going to have their own opinions. What I can say from my experience, and I've got 20, 25 years of experience in this, is that having the project manager be knowledgeable about the tools, the threats, and the infrastructure environment that they're putting this material in the project into, understanding that at least some depth is absolutely critical for the success of the project. Absolutely critical. So it is something different that the Project Management Institute, or PMI, is starting to touch on a little bit as it tries to keep up with the changes in project management and the changes in our business environment and this need for cybersecurity project management in particular. So having come from the technical background gave me some fundamental understanding of networks and network construction, packet transfer, and wireless networks, and all that kind of stuff. That as projects and those technologies evolved, I'm able to understand and keep up with an understanding of what the threats are, um, how we put things into place, the different tools that are involved with it. And then in your head, that's all going to swirl around and help you to guide the team to streamline your time to market, manage risks properly, and be able to prioritize issues and risks so that you're not spending critical resources on things that are of a lower return value.
Okay.
Essentially, a project manager, if you just bring in a fresh project manager that's just gotten their certification, yes, they can use the tools and they can manage your project, but bringing in somebody that has in those cybersecurity skills and that security knowledge background is the difference between my 3-year-old's refrigerator paintings and a Picasso.
Very good. So you mentioned the PMI, the Project Management Institute. How does one become a project manager? And especially if somebody is working for a smaller organization, are there ways to sort of, for an individual to begin this path that don't involve running off and getting an MBA on their own time?
Yes, there are. And there are some, and there are different pathways to get there. Some are free, some cost a little money. The best thing you can do is find a friendly project manager to talk with who knows the ropes and can help give you a person who is new to the whole environment access to groups, groups of people, industries, and tools that will help you self-educate. There are books out there. There's a particular book called Bare Knuckled Project Management. It's a tiny little thing it's like the project management PMBOK. It's the project manager Bible condensed down into this tiny little pocket textbook that has all of the critical pieces of project management in there. And reading and seeing what's involved in holistic project management is a great way to get started. Take the cover off, take the dust cover off, and show up somebody. This is all that's involved in project management. There's the people part of it, the budget part, the scheduling part, the issue resolution part, whether it's technical or people issues. There's a lot that's involved. So giving somebody a whole picture of that, either through a book or a Reddit subgroup or other free things that are out there on the internet, is a great way for somebody to dip their toes into the environment and see what's this career path like.
And for someone, I know we have talked frequently in our industry about getting people into the career path of cybersecurity from IT or from other uh, foundations. Um, is there a similar path for a project manager, or in your experience, are most project managers doing something else and they just have more training in project management?
Could you reframe what the overall question is?
Okay, so is project management its own defined career path? In other words, could someone have a career where their business card has on it project manager, or are they going to be, you know, IT manager who happens to know a lot about project management?
Oh, project management. Oh, absolutely. That is a fantastic question. So, aside from uh, all of the letters and abbreviations and certifications that you can put after your name, defining whether you are a project manager by career or an ancillary project manager because somebody's thrown those responsibilities on you is a completely different kettle of fish. A career project manager has a very different mindset of how all of these different pieces function and come together. They bring a lot more tools and strength to the table of being able to guide your team, guide your projects, and give you an optimal return on investment. Where somebody that has lesser exposure, who has a focus on maybe IT infrastructure support, but has a basic knowledge of project management, may only bring some of the basics to the table. Like, okay, I am a director of IT. My focus is production support of the infrastructure, but I know a little bit about project management. So I'm going to ask my team to write a project plan for how we're going to refresh all the servers. So that's a great start. And that's going to be a great tool for those folks to use as they implement that. But without having a project manager to manage that, what about the question of how are you going to handle issues when they come up? How are the issues going to get resolved? What are the deadlines? What are the other shifting responsibilities that are going to compete for your resources? a project manager is going to bring a lot more to the table to be able to bring that project to success. There are some statistics out there that show that 80% of projects fail. And that's without any project manager. And of projects that have a project manager, about 65% of those projects are successful as a result of having a project manager. So the statistics would imply that you are absolutely more likely to have a successful project and a marked ROI if you've got a project manager assisting you with something.
All right. Well, we have had a great conversation. We're coming towards the end of it, but I've got two important questions to ask. First question: if someone is listening to this and they have just had a project dumped in their lap, they're an IT person at a company and they've been told, boom, you've got to do this. Where would you send them to get started? I mean, is there, you mentioned all sorts of online resources and all like that. Is there one where you would send someone if they were getting started?
I would suggest two. You can go on Reddit and find project manager subreddits that are specific to your kind of project, where you have access to people who are already doing what you have to do. And you can ask questions of an educated audience. Second item is the bare knuckle project management book. It's kind of like project management for dummies. And I think project management for dummies is also out there. A summary book, not a Bible like the project management PMBOK, a small summary book that will let you read about all the aspects of project management and compare that to your situation, because you may not be responsible for all these aspects. Having that book to compare to your situation tells you, oh, this is what I'm going to be responsible for, so I better do this, this, and this. You'll be able to cherry pick the items from that basic book of knowledge of what's going to help you be successful.
Outstanding. And final question: if you had just one or two thoughts to leave with people at the end of our conversation, what would those be? What are the one or two takeaways that people should leave here top of mind?
Two things. One, that there is an immense value that a project manager, a good project manager, brings to the table to make your teams and your projects successful. And for anybody considering getting into cybersecurity and project management, absolutely do it. It changes so much. There's so much to learn all the time. It's so rewarding to put these projects in place and know that as a result of the work you did today, or your project team did today, you have hardened the security of this company and you have enabled it to do blah, blah, blah. You've made it PCI compliant. And not all career paths allow you to have that kind of personal value or feeling of personal accomplishment of what value your work has brought to the table for the team and for that company. And that's worth all the money in the world.
Outstanding. Well, Lori, thank you so much for being with us today. I have really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun.
Well, that was my conversation with Lori Keller. We appreciate Lori taking the time to be with us today. Join me next week for the CyberWatch Expert Series, when I'll have another experienced expert who will help you gain the information you need to be more successful at making your organization more cyber secure. This podcast has been brought to you by Access Point Consulting. Follow along with the CyberWatch Expert Series on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And as always, you can learn more about Access Point Consulting at www.accesspointconsulting.com. I'm Curtis Franklin. We'll see you next week.